All right, so I think we are live now. Thank you all for joining me today in what might be the first of many live streams that I'll be doing. For those of you who are wondering about my upcoming video, I am dedicated to get it all done um, this weekend, or at least get the script done this weekend. But I am going to start doing some reaction videos on live streams, as far as, as well as some other things on live streams as well. So go ahead and click the little bell so that you're notified when those happen. But with that being said, I wanted to go over this video today by Mr. Beat, by Matt, because it just really caught my eye, because it was are Democrats more conservative than Republicans? And so I decided I'm gonna go ahead and do that, see how it works and everything, and see what he has to say. So we're gonna watch this together. I haven't linked his video down, but once I'm done with this live stream, I'll put his video down in the description below so that you can watch it as well. It took me a little bit of time to get to this live stream because I still had it set on my voting trend channel, but I needed to have it on my election history channel. All right, so let's go ahead and watch and see what Matt has to say here. I have no idea. I've only seen like about 2 seconds of it to get the thumbnail for this video, but I have no idea what he's going to say. So let's go ahead and delve into it and see how it is. And I even told Matt that I'm going to respond to this. So yeah.
Who's conservative? Are you conservative? I'm Mr. Beat, and in some ways, I'm conservative. In other ways, not so much. Dictionary? When it comes...
So let me just go ahead before we get into it and like where my views come from. I am very progressive when it comes to economic issues. When it comes to what we call social issues, I'm very much a moderate, right? So I can be any way depending on what the issue is. When it comes to foreign policy, I would almost consider myself a hawk in some cases, but a pragmatic hawk, right? I didn't support I don't support going to Iraq. I didn't support going to Iraq. I don't support what we're doing right now with the Trump administration. So for me, I would say I fall into that Reagan Democratic mold. If you were to take someone back in the 1980s, that's where I would fall into the Reagan Democrat mold. But unlike a lot of Reagan Democrats who have now gone to the Republican side, I definitely have not gone to the Republican side. So that's where I stand when it comes to politics.
To politics, conservatism is a set of beliefs that promotes preserving traditional values. And when I say traditional, I mean stuff handed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. You get the idea, right? Being a conservative means you also often want to protect traditional customs, culture, and institutions. Generally speaking, conservatives are cool with the status quo, with keeping things more or less the same.
Now, I will make one mention here, because I do think that it's important, and that is the concept of, he's going to be talking about an American concept of conservatism and liberalism, right? So if you're from another country, this concept is not going to be the same. So in many countries, we have a three-part system. We have conservatives, we have those who are identified as liberals, and then we have socialists. As a matter of fact, if you ever read a book by Seymour Lipset, I mean, this is Continental Divide. He doesn't talk about it as much in here, but he basically came up with these theories. And one of the theories he said is that the United States never had a socialist awakening, so therefore we don't see socialism. Now, one thing you have to remember when it comes to European politics, you do really have three branches. You have traditional conservatism, which support what what Matt says in this video. So there's no doubt about that. But what it also does, if we look at Toryism and stuff like that, it supports a hierarchy, right? That there is a king or a top, and then the next levels of government are significantly lower in importance and have to be responsible going upward. So you see this hierarchy of the government. So that's what we have in traditional conservatism in like worldwide. Okay. When we go to liberalism, it's the idea of, Thomas Paine, individual liberties, stuff like that, right? Thomas Jefferson and what our country was founded on. Now, conservatism in the United States is based on, our politics in the United States are based on our views of liberalism. So we don't have the traditional Toryism here in the United States. And then obviously the socialism aspect was the workers take over the means of production, Marxism, stuff like that. So in the United States, we've never had the socialist revolution or the socialist awakening, and we've never had a Tory style government. In fact, we fought against it, right? So when we talk about left and right in American politics, we're really talking about left and right within liberalism, which makes it very, very narrow. So I just wanted to mention that because some people might be watching from other places, and that so that isn't the case. So somebody mentioned fascism and stuff like that. Yes, you do have other aspects of government as well. So fascism, I would argue, is within a subset of conservatism because it supports traditional values and having some sort of hierarchy, right? Places like Britain, they have a traditional conservative system, but it's also a liberal democracy as well.
Conservatives often get classified as, quote, right-wing. However, as I explained in this video, which I released 6 years ago, holy poop. As I explained in that video, that can be misleading because the whole right-wing, left-wing spectrum is problematic, to say the least. In the United States of America, yes, the USA, we have two major political parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. When most Americans hear, quote, conservative, they don't think cautious about institutional change. They think low taxes, pro-guns, strong border, anti-abortion, and indeed, for most of my entire life, the Republican Party has generally been considered the more conservative party in the United States. The party that wanted to keep things the same. The party of traditional values.
See, and this is where I do think it's kind of interesting because when we talk about conservatism within the United States, now we're going to talk about it within the realm of the United States. I don't know if necessarily that is the case about, keeping it the same, because we are seeing a lot of changes happen within the Republican Party that makes it like, well, it's not necessarily the same as it was. Okay, so take abortion. It was pro-life, abortion was illegal. Then you started seeing it legal in some states. Then Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court, made it legal nationwide. And then all of a sudden recently, you have Dobbs' decision, which now made it determined by the states. So I think the concept of conservatism is even ebbing and flowing, right? So I think it's really hard, and maybe this is what he's saying because he was talking about how maybe it's not right to identify this, that, or the other. I just find the issues very much ebb and flow.
Democratic Party, on the other hand, was considered the less conservative party. The party that wanted to change things. By the way, Republicans have only been calling Democrats liberal since the 1980s. Both parties used to call themselves that before.
Hey, that thumbnail looks, that picture looks familiar.
Before then. Anyway, in this video, I'm going to make a take that's hot. I I think there's a compelling argument that the Democratic Party is actually the more conservative major political party in recent years. But wait, hold up, will you please hear me out? Oh no, you already smashed that dislike button. Lame. Well, this sucks. My career is over. Dang it. Well,
now I am going to say again, from a personal point of view, it'll be interesting to see where he goes with this. I do believe that the Republican Party has ideas of changing America into the vision that they want, whereas the Democratic Party is simply the party against the Republican Party. I don't think that they really stand for much. That's why they need more guys like this guy in the corner here, I think, to be part of a movement. But I think I see where he's going. I probably will agree with him, because the Democrats are starting to stand for less and less with each and every election.
oh, I guess I should just be captured by my audience, right? Whatever you say goes. You're always right. Nah, dude. In this video, let's make the argument that the Democratic Party is the more conservative political party. You know, just for funsies. I hate to break it to you, but every time you go online, giant corporations are stealing your personal data.
We're going to go through the ad.
Here is why I think there's a solid argument that the Democratic Party is the more conservative major party in the United States in recent years. Hey, keep an open mind, Jackie. First of all, my definition of conservatism, which again is a set of beliefs that promotes preserving traditional values, goes back to the OG conservative, Edmund Burke. Considered one of the most influential conservative philosophers of the 1700s, baby, Burke hated the French Revolution's radical upheaval. He hated tearing down everything old for abstract ideals like liberty, equality, fraternity.
And I mean, obviously this wasn't, this was before the socialist awakening and the socialist movements. Though you do see that kind of starting to happen within the French Revolution. Okay. So we can say that the early American political theory did kind of grow out of this conservatism and liberalism. Okay. Because even at that time, we just didn't have that Marxist philosophy that would eventually grow, though we do start seeing the beginnings of it here.
Nah, dude. Burke argued for prudence, cautious, gradual change. Respect existing institutions, man. Preserve what works. Burke famously said, society is a, quote, partnership, not only between those who are living, but between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born. Based on all that, I speculate that if Burke was around today, he would say the Democratic Party was the more conservative major political party right now. And here are 3 reasons why. The Democratic Party seems to be for conserving the country's core political institutions, or the rules, norms, and organizations that have...
See, and before we go into what he has to say, this is actually very interesting, because what he's saying, and I can pretty much agree with it, is the Overton window is shifting as far as what the issues are facing the country today. And I think this is where he's really hitting at, is he's already talking about the Democrats are the ones that want to preserve the institutions, okay, whereas the Republicans want to... well, I don't know what he's going to say in regards to the Republicans, right? But so I can see where he's coming from, okay? And it's a very interesting twist on the idea of conservatism,
guided our behavior for generations. You know, stuff like federal agencies, the three branches of government, separation of powers among them, and within them, checks and balances, federalism, free and fair elections, peaceful power transfers, or the Constitution itself. The Republican Party, more often...
And I will say, before we go into the Republicans, I will say as far as institutions go, ever since Marbury versus Madison, you know, the courts have been significantly higher. Okay. And when we look at the power of the executive, there have been times where the executive has tried to push and push. Franklin Roosevelt really tried to push having this strong executive. But it hasn't been until now where we really see the executive having this overwhelming power. And it really is that they're having this overwhelming power because of the lacks of the courts actually going, you know, and punishing the, you know, overreach. Okay. Having a Bitcoin or a meme coin or whatever they have that people can just give money to that then benefits the president is, you know, purely against federal law. It is against the law when Donald Trump in 2020 actually had the RNC convention speech on White House grounds. There are tons of laws that he broke as far as the norms and the standards. But we are starting to see a big push when it comes to the power of the presidency. But I'd still argue when Marbury versus Madison happened, that's when we started seeing the crumbling of the so-called three equal branches of government.
Than not seems to question these political institutions. Here's a prime example of this. After the presidential election of 2020, millions of Republican voters, as well as a majority of Republican members of Congress, challenged the election results. They protested across the country. All of this culminated with the January 6th United States Capitol attack, which saw President Donald Trump supporters violently raid the Capitol building in order to prevent the certification of the election results. Flash forward to the presidential election of 2024, and Democratic voters, even though many of them were shocked and all of them were disappointed, overwhelmingly accepted the results. Here's another example. In his second term, Trump has overhauled federal agencies, fired thousands of civil servants, went to war without Congress, and straight up consolidated power in the executive branch. If Burke was around today, he'd...
See, now when it comes to quote unquote war, you know, without congressional approval, this is where there's kind of a fine line, right? Because there wasn't a declaration of war. Obviously, that's done by Congress. There doesn't need to be really a declaration of war. It is the president who is the commander in chief, and unfortunately, he can make a strike against a country if he wants. Now, the question is, will he go to Congress asking for the authorization for the use of military force? There doesn't seem to be that route happening right now, which is in pure violation of federal law. It's not part of the Constitution, but federal law. And again, will this be challenged in court? And will the courts then say, oh, well, he's the commander in chief, therefore he can do whatever he wants with the army? The courts have not said that in the past. But, you know, if you look at the Equal Protection Clause, the way they interpreted it in 2000 was also not how they traditionally did it. So this is where I always push back a little bit on when it comes to the quote unquote declaration of war, because at the end of the day, he is commander in chief and he can conduct military actions, right? It's to what extent they can go and how long they can go where you need congressional approval. I mean, we didn't declare war in Vietnam or any of the wars since, okay? So yeah.
Call that radical experimentation.
Actually, the Iraq War, we might have had the congressional approval. Or, excuse me, I always say the Iraq War, the Persian Gulf War.
Not careful conservation. Hundreds of political scientists have said that the United States is straight up headed toward authoritarianism. In case there's any confusion on this, the United States has never been an authoritarian country. Well, not fully. The Democratic Party, meanwhile, has moved into the role of institutionalist. They are consistently trying to protect government agencies and congressional norms. This is probably the clearest example. Since World War II, conservative foreign policy often meant internationalism. It meant strong alliances and American leadership influence over the rest of the world, particularly with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, a military alliance of 32 European and North American democratic countries.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
That was the Republican brand. But today, many prominent Republicans, led by Trump, of course, have turned their backs on allies.
We're going to build a wall. It's going to be built.
They've questioned NATO and pulled back from international agreements.
As President of the United States, I will always put America first. Just like you, as the leaders of your countries, will always and should always put your countries first.
And who seems to be defending the post-World War II global order now? The Democrats. They are the ones arguing for the preservation and even strengthening of the alliance.
And honestly, I mean, this is from a personal point of view. We could have done a lot more for Ukraine before Biden left. I'm just going to be honest. That's just my pure opinion. But yeah, somebody in the comments said the power of the purse ultimately allows Congress to control every military conflict. We're starting to see a change with that as well, right? We're starting to see the executive just say, we're not going to fund this. We are going to fund this. Hey, if your state does this, we're not going to fund it, even though appropriations for those fundings have already been done. We're really and this is where we see that real expansion of executive power. Is you just do not, these are norms that we've never seen before. And so in a normal world, and that's where we have to make the argument, in a normal world, the democracy that we knew beforehand, we would say that these were the norms. These were how the institutions were built, and these were the norms that we had. But now we're coming to the point that those aren't the norms anymore, unfortunately.
Alliance system that has defined the last 80 years. For a long time, conservative meant being cool with free trade and against protectionism, or the restriction of trade to protect domestic industries from foreign competition. Today.
So wait, now this is where I would have a question with Matt on this one. And the reason why is prior to, I would say, the 1950s, maybe even the 1970s, the Democrats were very much the free trade party, okay? Whereas the Republicans were the protectionist tariff party and all that. And that goes back all the way. So there was this eventual shift that happened. One can maybe say that NAFTA was maybe where the current lines were drawn. But overall, if we look at free trade under Democrats who were in Congress in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and I would go up to 60s, because I can't think of like right when that shift happened. A lot of them were free trade. And a lot of the Republicans were protectionist. So Republicans did support tariffs. And then if we go back to the liberal and conservatives way back at the turn of the century, right? It was the progressives that were against having tariffs, where the conservatives were the ones that were really pushing to have tariffs, which caused a bunch of, economic hardships. So this, again, I think is an issue that kind of has flipped. So it traditionally was the liberals were more free trade, or the conservatives were anti-free trade. Then there was a flip, and I guess that would be more as the unions became involved with the Democratic Party. There was the flipped toward protectionism when it comes to the liberals, and now we're seeing that flip again. So it's almost as if we're readjusting the order that we saw 80 to 100 years ago.
Hey? Oh, they're much cooler with protectionism. They're perfectly cool with using the power of government to pick winners and losers through tariffs and trade wars. The biggest critics of tariffs have been Democrats.
California Governor Gavin Newsom and State Attorney General Bob Bonta announcing a lawsuit Tuesday against the Trump administration and its authority to unilaterally enact tariffs on trade partners around the globe.
The Republican Party used to mostly be the party
I don't
of...
know if Matt's going to mention this, and I hope he does too, because that Gavin Newsom thing is an interesting thing. Maybe he'll mention it next, is the concept of federalism, right? So you had the Democrats that were for, or the liberals. I keep on saying Democrats, and I should say liberals because we're talking about liberals and conservatives. Well, we're also talking about partisanship as well. You had the liberals that were for more government, I don't want to say intervention, but it really is intervention in things like healthcare and so on, whereas the Republicans were either, we don't want the federal government involved, or if government is going to be involved at all, that has to be a decision for the states, right? So the Democrats always supported a stronger federal government with weaker abilities for the states, whereas the Republicans were into, or the conservatives, again, mixing those up, were into states' rights, right? So to me, if we're really looking at this, it's not really clear to me where that is, because we're starting to now see, depending on which side of the fence you are, you support the strong federal or the weak federal system, right? So for the Democrats, for example, they are obviously supportive of the federal government determining, or the federal courts determining abortion policy until the courts eventually overturn that, right? So it'll be interesting to see if he talks about the role of federalism and the strength of the executive under federalism.
Wall Street and big business. Now, the Democratic Party is just as much in bed with Wall Street and big business, if not more so.
Yep.
Okay, let's be real here. This isn't a slam dunk.
In his life, Christ displayed true humility. In his death, he modeled true love.
On social and cultural issues, Republicans still generally lean more conservative. Many Republicans are against abortion expansion, against the federal government doing anything about climate change, against too much immigration, for school choice, for traditional family structures, and for traditional gender roles. On all these issues,
and for those of you who are wondering what school choice is, if you're from another country, that usually is the idea of providing public tax dollars to individuals to enroll their kids in private school. So if you have a child and you don't want them to go to public school, the government would pay you to pay for the tuition for a private school. So I know a lot of people who watch this channel are from other countries. So school choice, if we just say school choice overall, that sounds fine, but it's basically taking money out of the public school system and putting it into the private school system.
The Democrats are still the party of change. Many Republicans also more consistently talk about fiscal conservatism, or making sure the government doesn't spend so much money. Well, they talk about it, but Republicans currently in power have done nothing to actually rein in spending in recent years. Now, some modern Republicans might even argue that they are trying to restore an older America, like before the federal government dramatically grew throughout the 20th century. Okay. Fair point, I guess. But even supposed restoration requires massive dramatic upheaval. You can't go back to 1956 without tearing apart a lot of what exists in 2026. That's not preservation. That's revolution. The bottom line is, when we look at the function of the two major political parties, the roles have flipped. The Republican Party is now the party of radical.
I think it's funny he put two former Democrats here. That's just that makes the point, doesn't it? It'll be interesting if he puts never Trumpers for the Democrats.
Reform, populism, and dismantling institutions. The Democratic Party is the party of institutionalism, international stability, and preserving the status quo. So the argument ain't that Democrats are conservative on everything, they're just more conservative on the fundamentals of government, the rule of law, institutions, and cautious change. And I have to point out that a growing number of Democrats are not like that. Many Democrats are now calling for more dramatic reforms like universal health care, universal basic income, a wealth tax, and straight up amending the Constitution to end partisan gerrymandering and bring in a number of voting reforms. Then again, calling to amend the Constitution as opposed to straight up reinterpreting the Constitution however you want to still seems somewhat conservative these days. Politics isn't static. As I point out in my party systems video, political parties evolve. And even political labels can mean different things to different people and at different times in history. For decades, conservative has often been interlinked with stability, responsibility, and caution, all qualities most voters value. Liberal.
See, and then in that, I mean, now this is where I maybe am talking from a partisan point of view. I find that the opposites, right? Jimmy Carter, obviously, there was instability. When Bill Clinton left office, major stability. Okay, when Barack Obama left office, major stability. And I mean, obviously, when Biden left office, there was not major stability, but that was because, the prices were high. We had we had inflation, everything like that. So there are those issues. But with Republicans, they've almost all had a recession. They've almost all brought us into some sort of military conflict. And what I think is really interesting with the presidents during my lifetime, the Republican presidents during my lifetime, are the ones that have really spoken, strong when it comes to using force. Ronald Reagan, I think, is number one, was the one who actually used the least amount of force. Okay. If we think about wars, true wars that are started, the Bushes have done more than any of them combined. So I would argue that the Democrats, and this is maybe a messaging and perception problem, I would argue that the Democrats in many cases are more stable. Okay. But it's really a president by president thing, right?
On the other hand, has often been interlinked with recklessness, radicalism, and instability, things most voters distrust. My main point is, whenever a politician calls themselves a conservative, ask them why they call themselves a conservative. Voters should judge based on principles, not labels. I consider myself a conservative when it comes to certain aspects of my country that have been around for centuries. Stuff like separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, the rule of law. Sure, they're blindly accepted.
Oops, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that.
Sure, the brand.
I mean, that's a radical idea, right? To support these things, but this is where we are right now. This is the country that we have.
Of conservatism may still be associated with the Republican Party, but the practice of conservatism is arguably more associated with the Democratic Party these days. That doesn't make the Democrats right or the Republicans wrong. It doesn't mean you should vote one way or another. It just means our political vocabulary is struggling to keep up with a quickly shifting political reality. And honestly, I think that's worth knowing, which is why I'm going to make a video about it. I promise. Apparently, I already did make a video about it. As a matter of fact, I'm in it right now. And you just watched it. Ha!
All right, so I wonder if he has. Oh yeah, he has his Patreons and stuff like that afterwards. Yeah, overall, I mean, that's good. That was that was a good video because it kind of makes you, it isn't necessarily about conservatism or liberalism or even Democrats or Republicans or whatever. It really shows to me just how much of a cluster F politics is in the United States. And it goes to something that when I talk about politics, and I mentioned my history videos and other things, is that you can't really identify one as a liberal or conservative. As he prefaced at the beginning of this video, he said, listen, I'm conservative on some things, right? So I think what he really tried to hit at in this video was saying ideology, partisanship, and so on just do not fall into these nice, clean little categories that we can then identify as a conservative or a progressive. That's why for me, I would identify as a progressive when it comes to economic issues, but very much a moderate when it comes to social issues, and very much conservative when it comes to foreign policy. Okay, so I'm all over the place when it comes to that. That being said, this was a really good video. I was very happy to see him actually address this. I do see that he has the party switch down there. There might be a point where I take a whole 3 weeks off, even though you're probably saying, Dave, you just took a whole 3 weeks off. No, I've just been very busy at my regular job and I was in Florida. I will be doing a video about the big switch because it's not what people think. So I've delved into the history and I've delved into the American National Election Studies data to try to flush this out. So that's going to be the next one of the next videos that I do, and that's going to be a huge one. That's going to be a long one probably. But yeah, Matt did a great job on this one, like he always does. Again, what I like about it is he's approaching it in a different way that make people think about our system and what does it mean to be a conservative or a liberal. It isn't as clear cut as people say, and I think he proved that here. So that's what we have for today's live stream. Thank you all very much. I will see you in the next live stream. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed already, and I will be doing more regular videos here soon. Like I said, had a very busy time, but the California video is on its way. I'm going to be spending all weekend working on the script and hopefully have that out by the middle of next week. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day wherever it is you are, and I will see you in the next live stream.